All right, good morning or good afternoon, whatever the case may be, and welcome from the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service's National Conservation Training Center here in Shepherdstown, West Virginia. My name is Shana Carney, and I'd like to welcome you to today's broadcast of the Safeguarding Wildlife from Climate Change web conference series. This series is sponsored jointly with our colleagues at the National Wildlife Federation, and today's webinar will highlight an innovative riparian planting and restoration decision support tool funded by the Appalachian Landscape Conservation Cooperative that's now available to the conservation community. So with that, let's go ahead and get started. I'll go ahead and turn it over to Naomi Edelson, Director of State and Federal Partnerships at the National Wildlife Federation, who will be introducing our speaker today. Naomi?
Thank you. We're very pleased to have Jessica Rhodes join us today. She is a fish and wildlife biologist for the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service in a joint position with the Appalachian LCC and the Partners and Fish and Wildlife Services Partners for Fish and Wildlife Program. Sounds really great, joint position. She began in 2002 as a student with the Fish and Wildlife Services Pennsylvania Field Office through the Student Career Experience Program. And then she went on and got her bachelor's in Fish and Wildlife from Penn State in 2004. And then in 2005, she transferred over to the Virginia Ecological Services Field Office of Fish and Wildlife Service in the Partners for Fish and Wildlife Program. She then came to the Appalachian LCC very recently, just in December of 2014. She's finished her master's degree in Geographic Information Systems, or GIS as we call it, from Penn State, and she continues to work on her GIS skills. And we're very, very pleased to have her lead the webinar today to talk about innovative riparian planting and restoration decision support tool, which has been funded by the Appalachian Landscape Conservation Cooperative and is now going to be available for all of us in the conservation community. So Jessica, we really appreciate your time, and I look forward to learning more about the tool you've helped create. Thank you.
Thank you. So hi, this is Jessica, and today, like I said, we're going to discuss this tool that has been developed, and it's an innovative web-based tool which, as said, was funded by the Appalachian LCC and developed by researchers from the U.S. Forest Service and the University of Massachusetts. So this is a brief overview of what we're going to talk about today. So first, I'm going to talk about why we want to anticipate climate change and what are the potential effects for some of our species. And then I'm going to give you guys a brief overview of the background information used to create the tool and a recognition of the developmental and the investigative teams, and an overview of the tool and the parameters used. And then I'm going to go through a brief tutorial on actually executing the tool and give examples of how managers can incorporate the tool to strategically plan conservation actions. So this slide here shows some results from a study that was conducted by North Carolina State University, and it displays the change in average temperatures that have occurred over the last century. And these are based on straight line projections. So if temperatures keep increasing at the same rate that has been historically, this is where we expect to be by the year 2080. So these represent the number of weeks for the entire week that the temperature went over 100 degrees Fahrenheit. And you can see in the upper right-hand corner of this slide, the darker the red, the more weeks that we met this criteria. So you can see in the 1970s, there wasn't a lot of the country. You have Texas and California that had a lot of these. But by 2080, you can see the significant difference that is expected to occur based on these projections. And so the implications of this are a major concern to aquatic systems. Riparian zones are likely to face dramatic changes as a result of this increase. And as a way to anticipate and plan for climate change effects, landscape conservation cooperatives, otherwise known as LCCs, were first envisioned through an order issued by Department of Interior Secretary Salazar in 2009. And this order issued the department to establish these networks to address climate change impacts and help to craft practical landscape level strategies. And this is really important because the effects of climate change are well beyond anything we have dealt with before, so we must work jointly with our partners to ensure conservation success. As I mentioned, we expect increased temperatures as a result of climate change, and this is really a major concern in the eastern U.S. and is a very likely threat to the persistence of a lot of the cold water dependent species. And the eastern brook trout is one of these species specifically, and we consider this a sentinel species. So they serve sort of like the aquatic version of the canary in a coal mine, so we would expect to see effects on the brook trout population before other species that may inhabit similar areas. Temperature is a primary constraint on these species, so and in addition to brook trout being an important sentinel species, they also serve as a valuable recreational resource. And this is important because this can be used as an incentive for private landowners to voluntarily take conservation action. And some of these conservation actions include stream bank fencing to help exclude livestock from a waterway, stream channel restoration, riparian corridor establishment, or putting their land under conservation easements. And the decline of brook trout serves as a warning about the health of local waterways and the lands which drain them. More than a century of declining brook trout populations have already led to a loss of economic revenue and recreational fishing opportunities. And even more important, there are models based on simple relationship between stream and air temperatures which predict the possible extirpation of brook trout in the southern Appalachian region. As I mentioned, brook trout are definitely vulnerable to some of the impacts of climate change. And so you can see from the assessment of brook trout populations that they have already been severely affected over the last 200 years. So only 31% of the subwatersheds that originally contained brook trout habitat still have greater than 50% of their original habitat intact. And with this map in the upper right-hand corner of the slide, you can see the areas in green are those areas that are, in fact, intact at this time. 35% of the subwatersheds that originally contained brook trout habitat only have less than 50% of that original habitat still intact. And then at least 28% of the subwatersheds that originally contained brook trout, the brook trout have been extirpated from those watersheds. And you can see that in the gray areas of the map. So this is a species that we're already seeing impacts associated with the temperature increases. So now I want to talk to you some about how the background information that was used and to acknowledge the team and talk about a little bit about how the tool, what the criteria are in the tool. So there are three main management responses that I wanted to talk about. These include protection, and this involves maintaining existing habitat where the species is currently located. So these would be the watersheds where the brook trout is still in at least 50% of the original habitat. There are also areas where we would reconnect habitat, and these include things such as dam removal, installation of fish passage. This would be in areas where the brook trout populations are currently reduced. And the goal in these areas would be to increase the presence of already existing populations. So reconnecting these populations and restoring habitat access creates more climate resilient populations and habitats. There are also areas where we would focus restoration efforts, and these would be in subwatersheds where brook trout populations have been extirpated. So the goal would be to create favorable habitat conditions so that brook trout would once again be able to inhabit these areas. So a combination of these three strategies will help to increase the resiliency of populations throughout their range. As I mentioned, streams vary considerably in their sensitivity to increased air temperatures. Resilient streams are really important because they can help provide refugia for cold water species. And a major determinant among stream variation in both current and predicted future temperature regimes is the direct exposure to sunlight, and this is also known as solar gain. And solar gain is composed of two components. It's composed of geography, which includes things such as aspect, elevation, topography, and also the extent to which streams are shaded by riparian vegetation. So this would be your percent canopy cover. And so while managers cannot change the geography, they can directly influence solar gain to streams by restoring riparian shade through the restoration of the riparian corridors, planting trees, and doing those activities. So areas with high potential solar gain and a low percentage of canopy cover would be high priority areas for tree plantings, and this would help to reduce stream temperatures in an effective manner. As an example of how stream shading and the efficacy of these actions can help alleviate these increases, in a controlled experiment, artificial shading of 800 meters of a stream actually reduced the summer stream temperatures by 2 degrees Celsius for over a mile. So this effect is predicted to mitigate up to the equivalent of a 4-degree Celsius increase in air temperatures. So selecting and prioritizing restoration projects that maximize limited restoration dollars has been a challenge due to the lack of prioritization tools at the appropriate scale. Restoration efforts that contribute to climate change resiliency are also important, as demands are made for agencies to identify how their activities foster adaptation to a changing climate. To help fill the needs of developing these tools, the Riparian Prioritization for Climate Change Resilience web-based support tool was developed. And so, as I mentioned, this tool is a user-friendly web-based tool to identify priority areas for riparian restoration in the context of predicted climate change, and most importantly, and this is at an appropriate scale that deemed by practitioners. So different managers will have the ability to create their user-determined scale, and this was a very important component of the project. So this tool analyzes riparian corridors, and these are defined as areas within 100 meters of a stream centerline, and the stream layer that was used was from the National Hydrologic Data Set. This tool has been incorporated into open source data layers and is currently served on the Appalachian LCC portal. And this, we also call this the GeoNode. These tools are freely available and open to the public. And there are also additional data layers available on the GeoNode platform, which users can combine with the export from the Riparian tool to further refine the analysis. And this tool was funded by the Appalachian LCC, and the primary tool developer for this tool was Dr. Jason Coombs, and he's with the U.S. Forest Service. And also the primary investigators for this tool were Dr. Mark Huddy with USGS and Dr. Keith Nislow with the U.S. Forest Service. Within the tool, there are a total of 4 metrics. 2 of them are required essential metrics, and then there are 2 optional metrics which the users can specify. The required metrics are the percent canopy cover and the solar gain percentile. The additional metrics that users can choose to include are elevation and the percent impervious surface. So the first one I'm going to talk about is canopy cover. So this is important because it can help reduce the amount of energy absorbed by the sun, thereby buffering extreme temperatures that are associated and can be in conjunction with air temperature increases. And this is the variable of solar gain that can be altered by managers. A general guideline for the percent canopy cover of established riparian buffers is about 70%. Mitigation banks can require approximately 30% in the first years, and others consider 25% a good initial level. After these, canopy cover will generally fill in to desired values as time progresses. So thinking of these parameters and what managers want to include are important when you're getting ready to run the tool. So just think about the desired levels. The next metric that I was going to discuss is elevation, and this is one of the optional parameters. And this metric can further refine areas by eliminating areas below a certain elevation, and this can be an important component for species such as brook trout, which tends to be elevation restricted. Typically, you don't see them below certain elevations, so you would not want to include these in your prioritization. The other required metric is solar gain, and solar gain values are originally in a raw format, which are kind of difficult to interpret. So for the tool, these values were actually converted to a percentile. So when you put this parameter in, you're putting it, say the default is actually 70%. So you're saying that cell is with the 70th percentile of solar gain. So you can think about that when you're deciding which number you want to input. The final parameter that was included in the tool is the percent impervious surface. So percent impervious surface can cause some water quality impacts if it gets above a certain level. And generally you see impacts to water quality at about 10 to 15%. Above 10%, there's almost always a measurable loss of water quality. And between 10 to 25%, water quality impacts increase. In a lot of these watersheds, pollution and flooding are both evident. Above 25% impervious cover, water quality impacts can be so severe that it might not be possible to restore water quality to pre-existing conditions. So you have some general guidelines that you can use to look at, and so that you can choose at what level you want to include those areas in the analysis. In addition to these general guidelines, you may also have a particular species which is even more sensitive. So for instance, a survey of Maryland streams found that brook trout, which is a species which is very sensitive to water temperature and water quality, were not present in any streams where the watershed was greater than 2% impervious cover. So that's the overview of how the tool was developed and what's generally included in the tool. Now I want to walk you through a brief tutorial on how to actually use the tool. I want to mention that the supporting materials and training are available at the link provided at the bottom of your slide. There's a report and there's step-by-step instructions on how to specifically use the tool. And also, this presentation is being recorded and will be available for later viewing if you want to refresh on what was presented here. So there are some basic elements of the tool, and you can see that there is a map viewer, and that's on the map that you see on the left-hand side of the slide. And there's also a selection panel. And within the map viewer, you can see the boundary area that you see. It's the red line that you see. That is actually the Eastern Brook Trout Joint Venture boundary. Within the map viewer, you have the option to change the different base maps. So the map you see is the default base map you'll see if you go into the tool for the first time. You can change that easily. You see the icon circled in red. That you can click on that, and then you'll get this drop-down menu that, and you can check from any of those base maps that are available. It's also very easy to navigate within the mapper, and you have a couple different ways to do this. So as you can see, the red circle, that is the search box. So if you click on that, a pop-up box will come up, and in there you can type either a place name, or you can actually enter coordinates as well, latitude, longitudinal coordinates. You can also zoom manually by using the tools, the plus or minus button, and if you click those, that will zoom in and out on the map. And also, if you zoom in too far and you have trouble figuring out where you are, you can go back to the original extent by clicking the square that's right above the magnifying glass, and that will take you to the original extent of the map. So the first thing a user needs to do is they need to select their scale for the analysis. And you have a couple different options. You have state, county, and county boundaries, and then various watershed sizes. You can see the different level of HUCs that the analysis can be performed on. And when you run the analysis, it will run it on one area at a time. So you can run it on one 8-digit HUC or one 12-digit HUC, but you won't run multiple HUCs at the same time. And the larger the area that's selected, this may increase your analysis runtime. So for instance, running the state analysis will take a little longer than running a 12-digit HUC, which is a pretty small area. So this analysis is a raster-based analysis, and the resolution is 30 meters. Each category represents the condition for that particular 30-meter grid. And so as a canopy cover and solar gain are required, and you can see those as toward the top two. And then elevation and impervious surface, those are your optional parameters. And if you decide you do want to use those, you need to make sure that those boxes are checked so that they will be incorporated in the analysis. So now what I want to do is walk you through a brief sample exercise and what your results will look like. So I used Roanoke, Virginia, so I just typed the box in, pressed the green button, and I searched. And when you're done, you'll see the little, the blue marker will show you where the location was that you entered. Next, on the selection panel, which will be below the map, you'll want to click Select Feature. And then you can click anywhere on the map, and it will highlight the area of interest. So in the drop-down menu, I had selected hydrologic unit code 8. So when I clicked on the map, it highlighted that 8-digit HUC that I clicked within. And then you need to enter your parameters of interest. In this example, I have them highlighted in red. I stuck with the default parameters that were included, and you can see I have the box checked to use impervious surface. And then you click Make Request. And when the analysis is running, I have this circled. You can see that it says working. The box will be gray right by the name, and when it's done, you'll see the box will be blue, and you can see those will be the options, and the ones below are the analysis that have already been run. When the analysis completes, you'll get, this will be within the map viewer. It'll zoom to your area, and the riparian zones in this example that do not meet the specifications are in yellow. So that is that buffer zone within 100 meters of the stream center line. And the riparian zones which do meet the specifications which the user entered are in black. I do want to note that the default colors were recently changed, so when you go in there now, you'll see all the yellow areas will actually be light blue, and the black areas will be dark blue. Just a note, that change actually took place this morning, and I wanted to make sure you knew if you decided to go in and use the tool. Also, what's really nice about the analysis is that once you run it, you can return to the analysis later. So you can do it right after you run the tool. On the screen here, you can see the window to the 3 layers to the right are the analysis that you have run. So you can click View, and it will open the layer in the GeoNode, which it is automatically downloaded to the GeoNode, or you can download the data to be used on your local machine in whatever software you choose, and it downloads in a GeoTIFF format, which is spatially referenced. So I mentioned the GeoNode. Some of you might not be familiar with that, but this is an example. When you go into the GeoNode and you click on layers, you'll see a list of all the data layers that have been uploaded. And this includes exports from the Riparian tool, as well as data layers that other users have uploaded. The name for the data layer from the Riparian tool is based on the unit of interest that the user selected, as well as the input parameters. So for example, the name that you see circled with the red rectangle, you can see all of them will begin with RP, CCR, Geo. And then the next part of the name, HUC8, is representative of the scale at which you did the analysis. So you know that this was done based on an 8-digit watershed. The 2253, the next group of numbers, actually represents the numerical name of the watershed selected. And then after that are the parameters that were entered. And the first two will always be C, then a number. So in this example, it is C70, and that represents that the canopy cover is less than or equal to 70%. The solar gain value is the next value, and you can see that that one was also 70%. And in this example, you see E600, and that indicates that the optional parameter of elevation was used, so that anything below 600 meters was not considered in this analysis. And also I2 represents the fact that the percent impervious cover was 2% or less. So this is nice. It helps you easily find the layers, and it helps you really understand the parameters that were also used. So anybody could come in and really understand what this layer is. And so the GeoNode is really nice because you can get, as I mentioned, there are additional data layers you can get to, and you can also get to maps people have created and posted, and you can also upload. So you can see here, this is where you can upload data layers, but you can also request an account, and so you have to have an account to upload. Anybody can see them, but only registered users can upload. And anybody can get an account. It doesn't matter if they're an Appalachian LCC member. It doesn't matter if they're even in that geography. So this is open to the conservation community as a whole. So anybody can submit a request, and we welcome you to do so. So next, I wanted to go, the final section is to go over applications of the tool and how to really use the tool to help make land management decisions. And so this tool, I've used brook trout a lot of as an example, but this isn't just a brook trout tool. It's a tool that can be used to help create resilient aquatic communities throughout the entire boundary. These maps here, you can see that also in the GeoNode, you see the Eastern brook trout priority scores, as well as the riparian tool. So they're tabbed within the GeoNode. And the GeoNode is part of a collaborative effort to make geospatially referenced data and tools that exist in various locations, but to co-locate them so everybody can access them in one spot. So this was Appalachian LCC working with the Eastern Brook Trout Joint Venture, jointly funded and purchased the domain for the conservation design. So any partners within the conservation community can be part of the GeoNode and utilize this function. And so definitely this goes beyond the Appalachian LCC and Eastern Brook Trout Joint Venture boundaries. So this this slide here, I wanted you to show how you can use the export from the Riparian tool and incorporate that with other prioritizations that have already taken place. So I ran this prioritization with in the Riparian tool, and I overlaid that on the Eastern Brook Trout priority scores. And you can see the map to the right, you can see the yellow, red, and green areas. That represents the priority scores. But you can see the riparian prioritization overlaid on that, so you can see the areas that meet the specifications and how they overlay with the priorities, and this can help you make implementation decisions. And so for any priority areas that your organization has decided, you can use the riparian tool to further refine that and to help strategically plan conservation actions. This slide here is an example that I wanted to show you that will help showcase the sensitivity of the tool. So you see the scenario on the left. It was analysis run with canopy cover that was less than or equal to 50%. Solar gain was within the 70th percentile and less than 5% impervious cover. So I ran the analysis. This is the same exact area, and then I ran it again, but increased the canopy cover to 70% and the impervious cover to 10%. And on the left, you can see there are some headwater stream sections which do not have any areas that met that criteria. But if you go to the right, and I have this highlighted in the yellow circle, you can see some of the light pink sections that were not previously identified. So when you run the tool, it just shows you to be cognizant of the parameters you choose, because the tool can be very sensitive, based on the areas and the parameters you're including. Another test analysis I did to show an example is to show you how to refine your prioritization based on the incorporation of other variables. In this example, I ran the riparian tool analysis with less than or equal to 60% canopy cover. I kept the solar gain at 70, and I used the impervious cover at 10%. So you can see in this example, dark blue areas are ones that met this criteria in both of these maps. But on the left-hand image, you can see that there is a headwater stream section highlighted that does not have any of the yellow circles. And these yellow circles represent permitted water withdrawals, and these were for permitted water withdrawals for the state of Virginia. And so you can see that this section here does not have any of those water withdrawals and is not likely to see impacts associated with water withdrawals. However, on the right, while you have a lot of area in the riparian corridor that did meet the criteria, you also have numerous permitted water withdrawals. So this could, these permitted water withdrawals could result in negative impacts to the stream flow, and this could reduce the suitability of this area for riparian buffer establishment. So even if the riparian buffers were established and you had high canopy cover, the water levels may make the habitat unsuitable to streams. So these areas, therefore, might not be the most effective areas for restoring riparian corridors. The last example I have, I wanted to also show that even with, I ran the riparian tool, and I wanted to show how you need to incorporate it with adjacent data to also help to make some decisions. So these maps here, the light blue areas, again, are the stream riparian corridors, but this time I overlaid this on the Southeast Gap land cover data. So what I wanted to show you here was that even though these red areas here are typically developed areas, so they're urban areas, areas with high impervious surface or other potential impacts. And you do have some areas like you see within the yellow circle on the left. There are some riparian corridor areas which do meet the criteria, but they are probably significantly impacted by urbanization. So these areas might not be high priority based on the adjacent land use. because when the analysis runs it based on the information that's within a specific grid. But it's important to also look outside of that grid when really planning your implementation strategies. So on the right-hand side, you can see now within the yellow circle that I've highlighted, there are significant numbers of riparian areas, but they do not have the amount of development and urbanization around them. So these areas may be more suitable for riparian restoration efforts, and restoring these areas could help to establish a contiguous riparian corridor versus restoring isolated habitat patches. So in restoring these contiguous areas will result in more resilient aquatic species communities. And with this tool, we really want to have a tool that helps us identify areas so that we can restore resilient aquatic communities to make these communities more adaptable to impacts associated with climate change. So the recap for this is that this tool is a shovel-ready prioritization tool for managers currently facing immediate on-the-ground decisions. We want people to be able to go to this tool, use it, have an output that they can immediately use to help them actually make on-the-ground actions. It focuses on key metrics identified by managers for their restoration activities, and these focus on tree planting and riparian corridors. The parameters that were used were solar gain, percent canopy cover, elevation, and impervious surface. And this tool really allows its users to customize the key metrics. They can view the data, they can save the data, and this helps to really refine analysis that is done, and you can utilize other maps that is stored on the conservation design server, and the GeoNode can be a really good tool for users to look at their data and to do comparisons and really prioritize based on those results. So you can also output the analysis from the tool to external servers and your local devices that you have, and you can incorporate it that way as well. And another really cool feature is that of this conservation design in this tool is that you can upload and share data sets with other members for comparisons, and so it really creates a way for the conservation community to come together and share data and coordinate, on the landscape level scale. And all these, we have a lot of supporting materials, training videos, and fact sheets, which are available at the website you see here. And so for that information, and you can also go to the applcc.org website and view other tools and resources that the Appalachian LCC has been a part of. And that was all I had for the presentation, but I'm willing and hoping to take any questions that you all might have.
All right, great. Thank you, Jessica, for that presentation. We'll go ahead and open up the conference for your questions. All right, it looks like we have some questions coming in. The first one we'll start with an easy one. The first one came from Paul there. He came in late, so he wanted to ask, how did you get the canopy cover data?
Well, there is the National Land Cover Data Set has canopy cover data for the continental United States, so that's available. We can also make that available on the GeoNode as well.
And kind of along that same lines there's a question from Bruce. What have you done in the way of validating the base themes, and what is the error rate?
I wasn't actually involved in the development of the tool, so I'm not sure what the answer to that is, but I could always get the answer and get back to you on that.
I have a question here from Paul, a different Paul this time. What type of Landsat imaging did you use to capture the percent of canopy cover?
I believe the canopy cover layer that was used was the National Land Cover, but I can check on that. So I don't know that they use the land side. I think they just use that canopy cover layer.
All right, and then another question this time from Paul Pickett, and I'm sure this is a question that multiple people on the webinar today have. Does this application only work for the Appalachian Landscape Conservation Cooperative? I'm in Washington State, so I'm curious about the applicability outside that area.
Right now, the tool is set up so that it works. The analysis will currently run for areas within the Eastern Brook Trout Joint Venture. But if you have other species which are sensitive to temperature, there's no reason why a tool like this could not be created for those areas. You know, once you had these data layers, and this tool, a similar tool could be created to incorporate other areas, definitely for sure.
Okay. And Stephanie asked, have any outside partners used the tool yet? Any actual applications of on-the-ground projects?
Well, the tool is still pretty new, so I don't have projects at this time, but we're hoping that, you know, soon that we'll get some. But the tool was it hasn't been out very long to have any of those examples yet.
Right. And then one comment there, Joy said, LIDAR would be a useful tool to apply, and then says, how about a similar tool for wetlands? So, like you got your work set out for you.
Those are always good ideas, and if there's anybody has any ideas, you know, definitely share them with us, and these are all great ideas.
All right, great. And we had a couple more questions come in.
Okay.
In the meantime there, Jimmy asked, what data set was used for solar gain?
Actually, I'm not sure. They didn't specify that, but I could always find out where they got that layer. The developers with University of Massachusetts got that.
Okay. Yeah, and feel free to follow up with me, Jessica, and I'll have Jimmy's email and can send that information.
Okay, definitely. I will follow up and get him the answer for that question.
All right. And Stephanie asked, is there any technical or financial support available for groups looking to use the tool?
By all means, if anybody would like to use the tool, they can contact me and I can do another webinar. I can give them a tutorial. So I'm more than happy to help anyone if they have any questions, and we can go into a more detailed how-to. So my email's at the bottom of the screen, and they can contact me, and I'll be more than happy to set something up and help them out.
All right, great. Yep, and our email again on the screen, and then as she had mentioned there's that supporting materials, training videos, and fact sheets if anybody was looking for that. So it doesn't look like I have any more questions for you at the moment. We had quite a few there, Jessica, in rapid succession, so good job there. Did you have any closing thoughts or comments you wanted to leave the group with?
Just that, you know, to encourage folks to go to the site, use the tool. There's a lot of information, especially, you know, once you go to the tool and you can see other things available in the geonode where the tool resides, and it's a great tool for people to collaborate, and I encourage people to utilize that tool and visit the Appalachian LCC portal and see what all the Appalachian LCC has to offer, because we have additional tools that are available and more that will be coming, and so there's a lot of great information there I encourage folks to check out.
All right, great. Thank you, Jessica, for your presentation and taking the time to join us today. As I'd also like to thank our co-sponsors, the National Wildlife Federation, and thank you to all of you for your participation today. A recording of this broadcast will be posted on the National Conservation Training Center's website shown on the screen. You can also go there and view any of our previous safeguarding webinars. Our next webinar will be held on Wednesday, May 27th, and that one's going to focus on adapting conservation easements to climate and landscape change. And we're going to take a little bit of a different format than our usual one. This is going to be an interactive discussion led by the principal investigator for a major study on adapting conservation easements to climate and landscape change. It will be Dr. Adina Rissman from the University of Wisconsin at Madison. So if you attend that webinar, be prepared to share how your organization may be adapting or barriers to adapting conservation easements. So with that, I'd like to thank everyone for joining us today and enjoy the rest of your Earth Day. See you next time.